Welcome back to CRE Corner, and today we're showcasing the PropTech industry, and I'm pleased to be joined by Sammy Pahal, Managing Director of the UK PropTech Association, so we can take a deep dive into the real estate and technology landscape, both reflecting on 2024 and looking forward to 2025. Welcome to the podcast, Sammy.
Thank you very much, David. Pleasure to be here.
I'm going to ask you in a minute just to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at the UK PropTech Association and a bit about the UK PropTech Association. But before we really get into that, we invite all of our guests on CRE Corner to shine the spotlight on a particular favourite commercial asset of yours. So if you have a favourite commercial building and why it's so memorable to you, let us know that.
Sure, great question. Firstly, I'd have to say, and I'm a little bit biased because we did used to work there pre-merger with BPF, but I would say 22 Bishopsgate is one of my favourite buildings in the UK, in London. And I think for me, what stands out about that building is it is a mixture of modern architecture, but also really tries to be something that is quite artistic and cultural as well. It obviously is a smart building and energy efficient, which is great. And I think every building is striving for that now, but it's also designed in a way that encourages collaboration, and there's communal spaces like the market kitchen, and in the office space that we worked in on the 7th floor in the Exchange, it was very much designed for that purpose as well. It was all sort of open plan, hot desking, and I think that's the way of the future. So yeah, I have to say that was one of my favorite buildings. It does also have a few of our members in there as well, which helps, and some of our members' PropTech solutions are being used for access control and the tenant engagement application as well.
Yeah, it's a cool building. Absolutely love that. And it's right in central London, which is perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself, Sammy. Tell us about your role. Tell us about the UK PropTech Association.
Sure, yeah. So my role is Managing Director of the UK PropTech Association. I do have a sort of dual role now since we merged with the British Property Federation in October 2023. So I'm also a director at the BPF and very much focused on integrating the tech world into the property world. And that also includes, from an internal perspective as well, integrating the work that we do and the events that we do with the BPF policy and events team as well. But I, as Managing Director, oversee our mission to connect PropTech and property companies, to support the PropTech sector to really grow and scale their businesses and get access to the resources and the knowledge that they need to do that, and act as an ambassador for PropTech within government and across the wider industry and nationally as well. So we do a lot to make sure that the industry and the public understand what PropTech is and what it means for them, and make sure that our PropTech members get access to the support that they need from a government perspective. And there's lots of exciting things I can talk a little bit about maybe a bit later on that front. But my role, is to really sort of manage that strategy and oversee our programs and content to make sure that we're delivering against that.
Thanks for that. And yeah, it's one of the things that's happened, I think, in technology in general since COVID. There's been a lot of change. And I imagine for organizations like yours, you've had to really oversee a lot of that change and be quite flexible and dynamic with that. So if we look back across 2024, what was your primary focus as an organization? And maybe what were some of the key achievements that you made last year?
So I think for us, it was twofold. It was to continue to support our PropTech community, and that has included giving them an environment where they can learn from each other, get access to support, and continue to promote the value of their PropTech solutions. So we've had different content series. My colleague Shweta introduced our Tech Tales, Stories of Collaboration series, where we looked at how some of our PropTech members working with specific clients, and we heard from both the PropTech company and the client as well in that series. So it was really to support their business, to support that communication of the return on investment that their client is getting and that journey as well, which I think we often don't really touch on, that understanding of actually how did that PropTech company get to work with that client, what were some of the challenges and lessons along the way, and what has that impact been. So it's been very much to support our PropTech members. And the other side of it, since merging with the BPF, has been to actually understand more about how we can support the property companies to navigate digital transformation better and support their understanding of the role of PropTech as well. So we launched a new tech and innovation program, which was designed to do just that. One aim was to really support the wider BPF membership with their understanding of technology. So we had a few different event types to do that. We had a transformative technologies tech fest, so we touched on AI, of course. We had a sustainability tech fest series, and we are starting to look at reimagining real estate as well to get people to think about the future of what the industry could look like. And we also worked with the individuals responsible for innovation and procuring PropTech to help them understand how they could do that more effectively, learning from each other. But also for us, it was helpful to understand what are some of those barriers that still remain today, which are preventing the PropTech industry from scaling or from being able to go from pilot to paid projects, and what could we do to help overcome those barriers, or what information could we take back to our PropTech community to help them do a better job of that as well. And as a result of that, we've developed an innovation leaders forum within the BPF membership. So we have about 25 people involved in that now, and that's continuing to grow. And these are the directors of innovation, chief information officers, innovation leads for major property organizations in the BPF membership.
Yeah, that's great. There's a lot to unpack there, Sammy. You clearly cover a very wide range of services, both supporting PropTech companies and the landlords and the asset management companies and property management companies. So one of the things you talked about there was this challenge of PropTech companies scaling. And I think that's been a really interesting topic of conversation over the last 12 months in terms of what major challenges do the PropTech industry face from the real estate industry when it comes to scaling? What are there things that they're having to adapt, and how are they adapting as we move into 2025 in order to take advantage of some of the initiatives that you're bringing in?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges that's always been there really is that it's difficult to get a contract signed in the first place. I think it can take 18 months or so to be able to sign a new client, which for a PropTech company in the early stages can really have quite a detrimental effect. If you've got investment into the business and you've hired staff and you're not getting that revenue coming in quickly enough, then obviously that has a knock-on effect. And so I think what we've seen is that companies are now starting to find ways to partner with clients and also work with other PropTech organizations as well to think about how they could either integrate their product or solution with another to really tackle the client's challenges and meet their objectives from a more sort of holistic perspective, but also as a route in. So I think that definitely helps. I think for property organizations, their biggest challenge is really being able to know and understand whether a PropTech company is credible, can actually deliver on what they're saying they're going to deliver and meet the ROI that they've pitch to them. So if they're able to work with a partner, I think that definitely helps. And I think the other challenge is when a PropTech then does work with a client is how do you actually, if you're providing a tech solution into a building, how do you scale that across multiple buildings? And I think there's a tendency to think that once you've got that client on board, that it's then easy to do that. And I think we've seen, as I'm sure you would have experienced as well, David, that's not always the case. In fact, it's usually not the case.
Constant ROI proving,
yeah.
I think, is key. But that's really interesting what you said there about those two things. I always feel like credibility is so important within the real estate market, in any market, of course, but particularly with such a slow moving contract signing process that you talked about. There's a lot of due diligence that goes into the company itself, and also what that long-term future would look like, i.e. the scalability across the portfolio.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this for a long time, coming up to 12, 13 years. We've definitely seen that requirement to continually build out what that ROI is going to look like, because properties are very unique in their own nature. So even if your solution works really well in one, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work really well in another one with a different user set, with a different makeup of the building. So in terms of that basis, and from your conversations, perhaps from the property side to start with, what are the key ROI things that they're really looking for?
So this is an interesting question. I actually had a conversation with one of our innovation leaders just last week on this subject, because they are, I think, still trying to grapple with that themselves. And it means something different, and what they value in terms of the ROI is different as well for different organizations. So that makes it quite difficult in itself as a PropTech company. But the sorts of things, or the ways in which I suppose they seem to be looking at it, is what is the tangible ROI and what is the intangible ROI? And the tangible ROI could be things like what impact does it have in terms of the value of the building? What new revenue could it bring in if it means securing more tenants or occupiers, increasing the rental rental prices, those sorts of things, a direct impact on revenue or value of the building, or on operational efficiency as well, and then obviously bringing down the costs of operating that building. So that seems to be the way in which they view the tangible ROI. The intangible is then, by the very nature, quite difficult to measure. And some might have ways in which to be able to provide examples of how maybe bringing in a tech solution has been able to inform a decision that's being made on the building, or on the tenant satisfaction or the occupier satisfaction. So those sorts of things might be classified as intangible, but there seems to be an understanding that there are tech solutions that exist that will provide that intangible ROI. But I still think there's a long way to go in terms of companies getting comfortable with that piece, because there is a tendency, I think, to just focus on the things that will create that tangible ROI. And obviously, that's understandable, especially if the market conditions are quite challenging. But what I would say, I think, to property organisations is that you have to be able to get comfortable with the intangible stuff as well, particularly as we look at the way that the industry is going. We're seeing more and more tech-focused property organisations or tech-enabled property businesses that are disrupting the industry, and you have to also be thinking about how tech can future-proof the industry and that organisation. And sometimes that's not easy to be able to measure. It's just got to be a bit of a intuitive, this seems like the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess, especially as you say, with the economic pressure that comes within, I think, in the UK right now and the uncertainty, but therefore everybody's looking at what the tangible benefits are. So increase revenue, reduce operating costs. They're two of the major ROI metrics. But then sometimes they take a long while. And so they start to blur from tangible into intangible, because you might take something like a sustainability piece of technology or a monitoring type of technology that is going to ultimately help you reduce operating costs in the long term, but it also might not. So does that then become a tangible or an intangible ROI? And as you say, the property companies have to make that and sometimes put their reputations on the line to be able to make that decision to start with a new piece of technology. But I think it's interesting how what you said before about the way in which property companies are procuring PropTech solutions as well, because again, credibility you mentioned before. But what do you think are some of the other challenges that perhaps PropTech companies face, maybe when they're very early stage in the kind of startup world, when they're first joining in and they've got good product market fit, but they're still winning that first deal? What do you think some of those challenges are that you're helping your members with?
I think it's probably experience is one of the biggest challenges. I think you quickly learn, if you're a PropTech company, you've been engaging with the industry for a while and you've been networking with prospective clients, you learn how to build those relationships and to get them to open up more about what their business priorities are, objectives are, because you may have the best product in the world and you may have something that you think really does solve a challenge, but that may not be the priority of the person that you're speaking to. So I think that's a challenge if you're very early in your journey and you haven't developed those relationships yet and you haven't built that trust, because once you do, I think you can really get that company or that individual that you're speaking to open up a bit more about what it is that they're trying to achieve. I think at the moment as well, we're seeing lots of new innovation leads coming in from outside of the industry who have a lot of experience with digital transformation in healthcare, in government, in retail in particular. And the first thing that they're doing is looking at their existing tech stack, looking at the PropTech solutions that they currently have, what's working well and what's not working so well. And often looking at ways in which they can streamline and make that a bit more efficient and cut back in some cases on the tech that they're using. If you're going into an organization to try and pitch your product to them and they're going through that process, that's not going to be a conducive conversation. So it's understanding, I think, where that client or prospective client is in their digital transformation journey, what their priorities are, what their objectives are, who they're currently working with, and then just understanding if it's the right time as well. And if it is the right time, how you can align what you're doing and your value proposition to those priorities.
I think you've put that really well. Actually, I think that's summed up exactly the sentiment, I think, of the property world. Is it's not that what you have as a PropTech company isn't a really good solution. It's just maybe now's not quite the right time, or it's not quite on the priority that I need to solve right this very second. But don't go away, because we probably will need your product at some point soon. So yeah, I think that's good. Shifting gears slightly, more onto the kind of PropTech side of things again now. There's a lot of news around funding, and one of the biggest challenges as a startup business in any industry, but I think particularly in PropTech because of the long contract cycles, as you mentioned, is that balance between fundraising, investing into product, investing into teams. From your experience and particularly expertise in the UK market, How are you finding your members navigating that landscape from 2024 and then into 2025? Because a lot's changed over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it certainly has. I think there's been a lot of lessons that have been learned in that time. I think when maybe sort of 2021, I would say, or just before that, we saw high levels of investment into PropTech. And I think there's then been an expectation that sort of level of investment would continue. And actually, that was quite unprecedented in terms of the amount of investment that was coming into the industry. But what that meant is that a lot of people, a lot of companies got quite trigger happy and hired lots of people and probably almost ran before they could walk. And now we're seeing that actually organizations, PropTechs now realize they need to operate in a lean method, and they need to make sure that they are thinking about nurturing those relationships that they've got with those clients and working with established companies and building that up from there. I think it just set unrealistic expectations because of the amounts of investment coming in that would continue. And I think there's, unfortunately been lessons learned that really just continue to invest in businesses, build those relationships, operate in a very efficient, lean way, and nurture talent as well. I think another challenge for startups is when they do hire so quickly, how do they make sure that they are getting the best out of their employees and nurturing that talent? Because people are the biggest sort of factor, I think, in the success of a business. So if you don't get that, where you hire great people, but you don't manage them in the right way, because you're firefighting, naturally founders are very focused on getting clients or getting more investment, and they're not necessarily putting that attention to how they actually manage the business and grow their teams and support their teams. So I would say that perhaps there's been more sort of prioritization of nurturing that talent, taking that lean approach to operating the business, and maybe even thinking about other forms of investment or funding as well. We know that there's lots of grant funding available. It's quite competitive. It takes quite a lot of time to even put in the applications in the first place. But we do find that actually companies that go through grant funding and then maybe get investment have a better track record. That's me just speculating, but that's what I can see.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things you offer at the UKPA is the ability to learn from each other, and the networking and the understanding of how other companies make mistakes. Everybody does, and how to learn from those so we can reduce the amount of mistakes that we make along the way as founders and executives, hiring the best people, and also understanding that there's different levels of people who are experts in certain areas depending on the stage of business that you're at. This real scrappy nature of that early stage startup is a different skill set to the kind of more scale up approach, or even the more experienced larger team and putting together big sales teams and commercial go-to-market functions. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be learned within the industry itself, and I know that organizations like yours actually play a really important role in allowing those people to get together and supporting the prop tech world. And I always say, without having a prop tech world, property teams don't know who to go to because there's no focus on it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's value in learning from each other, and there's also value in learning from external experts as well. One of the things that we do is we partner with service providers who can provide guidance on those things. So whether it is our legal firms who can help you understand how to create the right share structure in your organizations and incentivize your teams, or recruitment partners like LMRE who can advise what roles you might need at the stage of business that you're at. So I think it's definitely worth engaging those experts as well early on.
Yeah, definitely. And it's things like that you don't really think about when you're first starting out. You're trying to get customers and deliver really good customer service. But actually, I think what you've just mentioned there is make sure you structure your business in the right way, because that will make it easier as you go forward. So lots of things to do as a founder, I know.
Yeah.
But certainly part of the reason for these organizations existing like yours. Okay, let's talk a little bit about trends, and maybe again just reflecting on what you saw through 2024 as the types of technologies that were gaining traction last year, and then what you think, maybe a bit more kind of crystal ball type, but what you think might happen during 2025.
Yeah, always tricky to know what the future holds. I wish I could predict that. But I think the things that, from looking at last year, obviously, it was a huge AI boom. The popularity of ChatGPT and generative AI more broadly has just really, I think, excited a lot of people in the prop tech and property industries. And we are seeing already some applications of AI in the industry, and whether that is the property management or property maintenance side, predictive analytics, those sorts sorts of things, we are seeing it being used, which is fantastic. It is, I think, more of the generative AI type of AI that's being used, but it's a starting point. I think there's debate as to whether we will, as an industry, really realise the full potential of AI because of all of the challenges around data quality and access, and also the skills and the knowledge that we need in the industry to be able to use something like that. But I think it is exciting to see just what is even possible with generative AI already. And one of the things I think is starting to be looked at more and more, which you might see a bit more focus on in 2025 this year, is the waste optimization in buildings. So it's an area which hasn't really been spoken about that much, but we are seeing more and more PropTech companies pop up from outside of the UK coming into the UK market who are focused in that space. And it seems like something that's a bit of an afterthought, but actually it has impacts on ESG, it has impact on the operational efficiency, and it has impacts in terms of the data that you can collect as well. I think that's an interesting space that we'll see a bit more of. But we'll also, I think, see perhaps more companies trying to solve the data quality issue. I think there's an opportunity there for PropTech or just generally tech companies to come in and help with that, because there is that understanding that needs to get sorted in order to really benefit from it.
Yeah, lots of people talk about data, but you can hire an army of data analysts and still not get the answers that you're looking for. So having the technology drive that is really key. And do you think that will continue as a key trend in 2025? You think the kind of more absorption of better quality data?
I would say so, yes. And I think there are more initiatives in the industry now looking at this issue, and more organisations, trade bodies, networks coming together to collaborate. So I'm part of the Digital Property Market Steering Group, DPMSG, but there are lots of different industry stakeholders and bodies that represent the buying and selling process primarily. But they've come together to look at how we can digitise that process. And this has been something that's been a challenge for the industry forever. And there's been lots of attempts at trying to streamline the transaction process, make data available up front. But some of the organisations involved in this group actually, I think, hold the keys to that. And they're now willing to look at how they can digitise and get this data available. And it's supported by government, it's supported by MHCLG as well. So I think just having that sort of collective group of industry stakeholders and those that own the data as well coming together will really make an impact. I think now for the first time we're really seeing that kind of willingness to actually change things, do something about it, and think outside the box as well about how we do it.
Yeah. And will your organisation be fundamental in kind of the distribution of that information out to the market?
We will support that, yes. Yeah. My role as part of the DPMSG is to think about how the PropTech community can be, one, represented in the work that the DPMSG is doing, and that whatever is agreed as a group actually has a knock-on effect in a positive way for the PropTech industry, because we know already there are PropTech companies who are streamlining the transaction process, making it faster, more efficient, more transparent, etc. So we want to make sure that the ways in which the group are proposing to work together actually supports those existing tech companies, and it's not contradicting what they're doing or hindering what they're doing. So that's one. And then obviously whatever is agreed, there's already some work streams around getting an idea of who should be doing what at each stage in the transaction process and what data should be gathered at each stage. That sort of information can then, of course, UKPA can help disseminate that to our membership and to the wider industry. And there's more actually that we want to do on that front. I think there's so much information out there in the industry, not just property related data, but also I'm thinking just information on these types of initiatives, on accelerators, on VCs, and just having a central place for all of that information is really important.
I agree with that. And actually, even just in terms of education within the PropTech team, we hire people who haven't necessarily been brought up in real estate. Of course, they're experts in what they do. So being able to give them a resource library to read more information about what's happening in the industry, I think it's just so important. The more we can educate ourselves and each other, the better service we'll be able to provide to the property companies, and the more awareness that they'll have over what solutions exist that can help their organizations. So no, really important work that you're doing. And just finally then, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, because I'm going to ask you to give one piece of advice that you would give to a PropTech company or the real estate company for this year.
Oh, good question. I would say I'll give you one for both, shall I? So
Yeah, great.
advice to prop techs is network, build your knowledge on not just what the industry is interested in and what the trends are, but actually different organizations are prioritizing where they are in their digital transformation journey, build those relationships and think about who else you can be engaging with across those businesses as well. We're seeing more and more young professionals interested in prop tech. I mean, BPF have a BPF Futures network, which is anyone within the first 10 years of their career. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily junior in their position either. This can be often quite senior people that are on this network. I'm not sure many people are aware that UKPA members can also join the BPF Futures network. So if you are 10 years into your career or less than 10 years into your career, you can be part of that network and you can be actually building relationships as well as building your knowledge on the industry at the same time. So that would be my advice to network and join UKPA, of course, if you're not already a member, join BPF Futures if you're within that 10-year mark. For the real estate industry, for the property industry, I would say don't focus solely on ROI. Of course, it's really important and you need to be clear in terms of how that solution can impact your business, but focus on what your priorities are as a business and also where you want to be. Think ahead. And I think hopefully things like AI are already getting people to think in that way. But yeah, think about where you want to get to, what the business should look like and how you're going to operate in 10 years' time in a world that might look quite different.
Yeah, good advice. Thanks, Sammy. That's been really good talking to you. If anyone is interested in becoming part of the UKPA that maybe is not already, where do they go?
So they can go onto our website and send an inquiry in or reach out to myself on LinkedIn or one of my team, Shweta or Emily on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to contact us. Got lots of exciting things coming up this year. One thing I should mention as well is hopefully I've got a bit more time, David, but we're launching a opportunity for PropTech report, which is being commissioned by the MHCLG. We're going to be doing a lot of work around not just promoting the report and the key findings, but actually building on that as well this year and working with the industry to really understand what are the key challenges to scaling PropTech and how can we coordinate across public sector, private sector, and also what support can government offer to unlock the potential of PropTech, which is being articulated in the report. So we've got some really interesting figures in there. I think by the time this is going out, it should be out there already on our website, so you can download it. But it's a really good sort of starting point to understand what the PropTech industry looks like currently, but also what the potential impact can be if we're able to really unlock these opportunities and overcome the barriers to scaling. Yeah, hopefully useful piece of information and yeah, look forward to engaging with anybody that's interested and thanks so much for having me on, David.
No problem at all. It's been great to talk to you and I'm very much looking forward to downloading it from the website. So that's Sammy Pahal, the UK Managing Director at UK PropTech Association. And thank you very much. It's been great to have you on.
Thanks very much, David.